Welcome to EPG Pathsala, dear students. My name is Shefali Mishra. I am Assistant Professor in the Department of Psychology, Jesus and Mary College, and the present module is based on history and theoretical perspective of caste-related crime. The relationship between caste and crime has been linked in significant ways in human societies. The origin of the ideas of the link between caste system and crime has many theoretical explanations behind it. Some of them are indigenous, but a considerable amount of contribution comes from the discourse around it prevalent during the British period. The earliest scientific explanation available on criminality links criminal orientations with biological and physical characteristics. The Western notion of criminality, whether commonsensical, popular, or scientific, associates criminal behavior with typical physical appearances like flattened nose, scanty beard, and lopsided skull. Similar ideas also find expressions in great places of European literature such as Shakespeare's Richard III and also other such pieces. Overall, a conscious effort was made to establish a correlation between criminal acts on one hand and physical attributes like facial asymmetry on the other. In the first half of the 19th century, Western societies, Indian society too has never been far away from such conceptions that connect criminal behavior to certain castes. With a firm belief in the Varna system, Indian social contexts have encouraged and nurtured both the idea of decent based occupations as well as association of certain personality traits to caste and criminal behavior, thereby linking criminality to specific castes in society. It is believed that contemporary caste system in India was largely a colonial invention. This does not, however, mean that the concept of caste did not exist before colonialism, but that caste in its present form was shaped by the colonial process. The colonial discourse on criminal castes and tribes has largely been constructed based on the experiential account of the administration during the British rule. Drawing from the ideas of prevalence of caste-related occupations in ancient Indian society, it was proposed that criminals were descendants of criminals. Thus, criminal behavior was perceived as being determined by hereditary factors. Learning outcome for you all is that at the end of it, you will be able to develop an in-depth understanding of historical root of caste-based criminality, examine the various theoretical viewpoints related to caste-based crime, and understand in detail the linkage between caste and crime. If we examine the caste and crime relationship during colonial India, we see that of the many social practices that figure in British understanding of colonial India, caste-related crime is the strongest. The British scholars sketch an explicit relationship between caste and crime. There is enough evidence to suggest that during colonial times, the administrative discourse sought to relate caste and crime with a purpose. Scholars argue that in order to develop an understanding to avoid interference with the indigenous traditions and cultures, British undertook a systematic and exhaustive study of the caste of India. By cataloguing each caste characteristics, development of caste-based crime was one of the ideas that resulted from their understandings. As part of the caste profiles created, criminal and deviant behavior were included in caste description and classifications. Several observable behaviors were codified into caste descriptions. In other words, criminal behavior was added in the list of traits explainable in terms of caste. This led to the identification of the criminal caste whose members were believed to constitutionally behave in deviant manner, often breaking the law. The lower caste in the caste hierarchy and the aboriginal tribes were classified as criminal tribes and castes. This understanding was made explicit in the 1871 Criminal Tribe Act, which allowed the government to classify any tribe, gang, or class of persons as a criminal tribe, according to Kumar, a scholar in the area. In the Criminal Tribe Act, passed by the British in 1871, about 150 tribes around India were notified as criminals, giving the political white powers to arrest them and monitor their movements. This law seemed to be guided by the belief that just being born into one of those 150 tribes made one a criminal. It was assumed by the British officials that since most occupations in India were based on descent, that is, were inherited by ancestors, even criminality could have been a function of descent. It is also being noted that the upper caste Indian landlords were equally responsible for criminalization of castes. For instance, we see that it was usually upper caste landlords who brought initial accusations against certain tribes. As a result, the group labeled as criminal tribes tended to be generally from lower castes. Additionally, the responsibility of identification process being in the hands of upper caste meant that the colonial attempts to link caste and crime usually only affected the lower castes. In case of upper caste, crimes were attributed to individual biological traits, not to their castes, whereas the members of upper caste were kept away from the effects of the colonial discourse on castes. The members of lower castes were blamed for almost every deviant act that occurred. Within lower caste, if one person was criminal, the whole caste was liable to be seen in the same way. Thus, it can be inferred that shaping of caste was not purely in the British hand, it happened through a process that heavily involved the Indian people themselves. Examples of criminal classes in colonial India. Profiles of some of the primary groups alleged to have criminal antecedents would be helpful probably in getting a feel of their lives as well as enable us understand the rationale for suppression and persecution of these communities in those times. As per the colonial discourse, crime for these groups was alleged as being the primary source of livelihood or hereditary profession. First among them is Banjaras. Banjaras were found all over India. These were nomadic people and used to temporarily settle in encampments. Usually expert cattle lifters, Banjaras also committed highway robbery and dacoity in dwelling places. Similarly, Budhuks were described as a group of killers, and they were the ones, low caste men, who did not like doing manual work at all and hence indulged in acts like snatching for their livelihood. Similarly, we have thugs or fasikas who are described as secret brotherhood of murderers and plunderers. Skilled in the art of deception, they never committed robbery without murder. It is assumed that persons belonging to classified group took to crime because of their membership in a caste or tribe that followed crime as hereditary profession or occupation. Second, crime was also seen as linked to particular styles that marked different castes and tribes. Thus, the general discourse on caste provided the framework within which the connections between caste and crime were forged and then seen as a unique mask of Indian society. Even though the origin of concept of caste and crime is associated with British period and is part of colonial knowledge about Indian society, indigenous knowledge related to it cannot be ignored. Deeper explorations reveal the existence of the idea of caste-related crime much before the pre-British era. Caste and criminality in ancient Indian society. Much of the knowledge on criminality and caste linkages in ancient society can be derived from the textual sources. Referring to the ancient Indian context, we find acceptance of thieving, a communal trade. Robbers associated with act of thieving were never perceived as solitary operators but as an organized group that lived together. Most of the knowledge related to deviant acts as thieving appears in the Vedic narrative literature such as Aryanakas, that is the Wilderness Book. We find innumerable references of robbers in the ancient texts. In the great epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata, Puranic stories, that is Katha, the dramas, the Jatak parables of the Buddha's lives, in all these texts, The roadside, mountain passes and forests are said to be filled with groups of robbers that prey on merchants and travelers. Ancient Indian authors from Manu to the medieval compilers of tale collections all equate robbers and forest tribes. Evidence from such sources proves that the criminal tribes existed in India before Britishers. The narratives offer insights into the lives of these robbers who were always believed to stay beyond the fold of acceptable social and political life. The names of robber tribes we come across in most of the ancient texts are Dasyu, Malech, Dravir, Pulenda, Barbara, Bhilla, and Barbara. All of them represented lawlessness, depravity, and chaos at large. To be more specific, Dasyu or Dasa in Vedic writing referred to brute, barbarian, demons, outcasts, robbers, and beasts. Perhaps most plainly, it is a name still used by some tribal group appeared in Asian discourse too. Such people were often described in the ancient texts as low-born or appasada in Sanskrit. The Manusmriti identifies forest tribes or the low-living servants who were naturally drawn towards forbidden occupations like theft. Furthermore, these thieves were not included in the moral order and the way of life followed by the majority. Being an outsider, they were protected by law. Overall, we note a clear-cut identification of crime associated with certain castes or tribes present in the ancient society. Thus, drawing from the accounts of caste-based criminality, one can develop an understanding of the Indian society where caste always remained a defining feature of the society and where class-based criminality highlighted the collective behavior of social institutions. Even after independence, the colonial mindset did not seem to disappear. Although the Criminal Tribe Act was repealed, certain castes and tribes remain marginal and are subjected to inhuman treatment by other communities as well as the administration. Some of the theoretical perspective on caste and crime. The caste system is one of the oldest form of social stratification system, and even though it may be prohibited by the law, the political division continues to exist in the minds of people living many oppressed. Social conflict is the struggle for agency, power, and control in society. Social conflict occurs when two or more actors stand in opposition to each other, when in social interaction exerting social power to attain scarce goals and prevent the opponents from attaining them. Conflict theorists have argued that stratification is dysfunctional in nature. It is harmful to the society because social stratification benefits the group which holds power at the expense of others, especially those who are weak or poor. It creates a system which has winners and losers that are maintained specifically by those who are on the top. Others never get a fair chance to compete and thus they remain stuck in the lower rungs. This system feeds on itself, creating and perpetuating stratification systems. Conflict theories are basically perspective on viewpoints in social psychology and sociology which emphasize the social, political or material inequality of a particular social group. Such theories draw attention to power differentiation. Karl Marx is considered as the father of social conflict theory. Social conflict theory suggests that crime in any society is caused by the class conflict and laws are created by those in power to protect their rights. For instance, as per the Indian caste system, the Brahmins enjoyed supremacy and power. In order to protect their rights and interests, would definitely enforce and even modify the laws. All criminal acts in this regard thus have political undertones. The poor or the underprivileged commit crime because of their need, frustration and anger. On the other hand, wealthy or privileged engage in crime to keep up with their position in the society and to keep on holding the power. We look at conflict theory as an explanation of criminal behavior. To explain criminal behavior, conflict theory explanation of law and criminal justice system suggests that people with power would make and enforce laws which are in their interest. Criminal conduct originates when a behavior that is valued in one group is condemned and criminalized by another group. Each group has prescribed right or wrong way of behaving. Conduct norms of diverse groups have different norms, so cultural conflict results when a different group meets. It is assumed that different values that are present in various segments of society could lead an individual to a criminal behavior. Selin, for instance, has helped us identify two types of conflicts. The primary conflict, which may arise between two diverse cultures, for instance, between an established culture and recent immigrant. Here, norms of dominant culture become the deciding factor in labeling the incident as crime. Secondary conflict occurs in single cultures that has different subcultures wherein each one has its own conduct norms. In this case, conflict develops when norms of one subculture clashes or comes in conflict with another. Crime is experienced not only as criminal but also as a victim, which has been seen usually in the case of the oppressed groups. In the light of conflict theories, Wald paid attention to crimes that were political in nature, crimes that are result of attempts made to change or upset the segregation created by the caste system. Some of the critique of conflict theory has found support both as a theory of criminal behavior and as a theory of law. Conflict can lead to a criminal behavior, but in a number of situations there is no conflict. In fact, there is a consensus that crimes such as murder, rape, etc. should be prohibited by law. In that sense, conflict theory does not explain the core of legal code, which has been agreed on and benefits the society as a whole. In fact, in various cases it has been found that minorities tend to victimize other minorities. Thus, conflict theory has been criticized for explaining too little. To understand the notion of criminal caste, we also have to see two major bodies of knowledge that were instrumental in building the notion of criminal caste. Number one, ideas about nature of Indian society derived from colonial anthropology, and ideas drawn from the contemporary discourse on the understanding of crime and class in British population. This basically helped in building up a theory of criminality in India. As already noted, the British ideas about the nature of the Indian society was also one of the source of a notion of the criminal caste in India. As per them, Indians were guided by caste, caste-defined occupation, also relating caste to racial and hereditary theories of criminality. If somebody committed a crime, it was because their caste prescribed such behavior. Example, a family of carpenters is supposed to be so for a long period of time. So, a family whose ancestors were criminals is destined by the caste to commit crimes. We also will make an attempt to understand what we mean by hate crimes. Offences with hate as a major motivation are a relatively new form of criminalization. It has been accepted that the offender need not necessarily hate the victim to have committed a hate crime. Hate by many researchers has been understood as prejudice. Alport, for instance, defines ethnic prejudice as an antipathy based upon a faulty and inflexible generalization. It may be felt or expressed. It may be directed towards a group as a whole or towards an individual because he is a member of that group. Such generalizations are as a result of stereotyping, which is further communicated through various communication networks in the society. So, negative stereotyping, generalizations about a particular caste may play a huge role in committing crimes against them. Strain theory and socioeconomic insecurity. One of the most common criminological theories that have been used to explain hate crime is Merton's strain theory, which was given in 1968. He argued that deviant behavior is a result of disequilibrium between culturally prescribed goals and the means of attaining them legitimately. Due to inequalities in income, education, and even individual capacities, many people are not able to obtain their goals, resulting in a strain placed upon them, and as a response to the pressure, they may turn to illegitimate avenues, including violence to gain respect and acquire a social status in the society. Thus, the legislative amendments and reservations ensure that the oppressed castes get their basic rights and also a social standing which would ensure them not resorting to illegal avenues in order to gain respect and attain basic goals of life. Agnew in 1992 has expanded this theory of strain theory. He has discussed three specific types of strain that can affect an individual's inclination towards crime. Others may prevent individual from achieving their positively valued goals, in a way also taking their basic rights at times, including status, monetary and self-sufficiency goals. They may remove positively valued stimuli that individuals possess. They could present individual with negatively valued stimuli like harsh punishments and verbal insults. The realization that the other group or community is trying to limit their expected goals may make them angry and frustrated, in a way persuading them to adopt illegitimate means to attain these goals. Sometimes rumors or even the fact that certain minority group receives extra benefits from the government may fuel the disgruntled sentiments towards their perceived economic advantage, making them undeserving recipients of extraordinary treatment for the other group. As a result, minority identity groups become the scapegoats for the woes felt by indigenous or dominant members of the society. Thus, they blame others for frustration relating to unemployment, educational opportunities, and competition. At the heart of these are feelings of animosity towards the minority group, which can become a reason for their victimization. Hate crime studies have uncovered these negative sentiments among the offenders. Research carried out by Cad et al., for instance, also into the racial hate crimes, demonstrates the prevalence of animosity among certain identity groups, which is aggravated by socioeconomic disadvantage. The next theory that we are going to examine is doing difference theory. All hate crimes cannot be explained only through socioeconomic disadvantage or feeling of acknowledged shame. Barbara Perry in 2001 has noted that strain theory doesn't explain why some of the most atrocious hate crimes are carried out by the most economically and politically powerful people in the society. Perry argues that hate crime is better understood as the extreme form of discrimination which imitates from a culture of discrimination and marginalization. Thus, understanding power and agency becomes important in explaining hate crimes. The difference has been used to construct intersecting social hierarchies pertaining to gender, race, sexuality, and class. Identity groups may come together to ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or other such characteristics, like forming an in-group. While creating an in-group, we automatically create the other, the person who is most definitely not like us. Positioning our own identity leads to the creation of a hegemonic form. These forms are thus considered to be different, are resisted because they are feared. This fear is based on the supposition that others will impinge upon the in-group's identity, values, and norms, creating insecurity about the place in the society. This insecurity and helplessness may lead to feeling of animosity, an emotional reaction to gain a sense of control. Various forms of discrimination endured by the marginalized identity groups, a product of doing difference, can be taken ahead by including severe acts of prejudice such as hate violence. Perry asserted that some hate crimes are carried out by the powerful people or the group. For instance, in Indian context, it could be Brahmins. In the society, as they are fearful of difference and potential strain that others might place on their security. They use their power to incite hatred against others to suppress their social mobility. For instance, Brahmins did not allow the lower caste to read and recite Vedas, and the violation was followed by punitive punishments. Synthesizing the strain theory and doing difference theory, we note that it has been believed that culture of prejudice are nurtured within families, friends, and neighborhood. Negative labels are frequently attached to whole identity groups who are threat to the dominant caste, their status quo and socioeconomic security, labeling them as either deviants or inferior. By stigmatizing the whole identity group, dominant group dehumanizes the individuals with time. These labels become strong and then it gets difficult to change them, leaving these groups marginalized for a longer period of time. Thus, feelings of negativity directed towards these groups can be fueled by socioeconomic instability and internalized frustration about economic security. This is fueled by an emotion of fear, which creates a culture of prejudice which is sustained by various communication networks through which hate crimes emerge. Thus, it can be said that to understand caste-based crime as a modern-day concept, we have to look back to its original roots, initially in the ancient Indian thought system and practices, and later in the colonial accounts of British rule. The theoretical explanation of caste-based crime throws light on some of the basic theoretical perspectives and motivators of criminal behavior manifested by social groups. To sum up, we see that we have learned that the British scholars sketch an explicit relationship between caste and crime, linking observable behavior of people with caste description. We also learned that the 1871 Criminal Tribe Act allowed the government to classify any tribe or group of people as criminals. Reference to caste-based criminality appears in ancient Indian accounts too. In ancient texts, robbers are equated with forest tribes, for example. Caste and crime can be best explained by conflict theories, which hold that stratification leads to exploitation of weaker section by the powerful ones. Strain theory relates caste-based criminality to socioeconomic insecurity. According to doing difference theory, it results from a culture of discrimination and marginalization. Thank you.